would you define yourself as a leader?
Well, I think most of what I work on as a leader is just real kind of approachable. Try to create an environment of safety so we can have wide open conversations and be transparent. I'm open to being coached up as an example, so that when I have conversations or people feel that they want to have conversations, that I'm very approachable. And I think that's important, just to kind of have that. I think the other one is consistent and calm and collected. I think that's important. So the consistency provides an environment where people know what they're going to get when we look to have a good discussion, whether it's just a general discussion or more one that's more serious.
If I were to ask what your greatest strength, or maybe that one attribute you have that you feel has made you successful, what would that be?
No, I think it's just coming across with a high level of value-based type of consistent behavior. I think being very personable is important, and providing that environment so that people can learn and gravitate towards. I think that's important. And if I were to look back and kind of think of the one thing that I've kind of tried to remain consistent on, it would be that transparent type of approachable leadership that people can expect. And then also, I think the one thing I really try to do is respect everyone's opinion, and I think that's vital in this fast-paced environment.
You see leaders evolve. I know that I'm sort of in that phase as well, where I'm evolving. Is there one attribute that you had that you found, like maybe 10 years ago, that you found that you had to mature or you had to change as you were growing through your career?
I think if I don't know if it's an attribute, but one of the things that I have learned over the years is that you have to adapt and be flexible. I don't think that if you had a certain array of skills and attributes at the beginning, that they would be the same today. So if I think of one of the things that I want to make sure that is a part of my array of skills and abilities, is the ability to be flexible. Right? I often think leaders and CEOs need to be kind of like a chameleon. Sometimes you're required to lead in a way that is kind of in a workout situation. Sometimes you need to learn or lead in a way when you're in a growth mode. Or like if you look at today in COVID, you have to adapt your style so that it provides a strong environment of safety and soundness, but yes, still inspire the workforce that this will come to an end, and we'll be able to emerge out of it even better as an organization.
You can see you're very active. You guide a lot. You rely on empowering your team a lot in the way that I've seen. And one of my questions is, with the pandemic that's happening, has there been a change from your perspective on how teams have to be motivated during these times?
I think so. I think it's like anything. What you want to do is put your best leader forward. So let's just kind of look at the pandemic as an example. If you look at a true business continuity or pandemic plan, it's a structured environment. It's an hierarchy, and as an example, the CEO needs to be the point person, and I think that is the case in our organization. But I also know that there's other executives more gifted than me in certain components. So if we look at our success during the pandemic, that's one thing we did really well. We said, you're really good at communicating. You have that knack or that ability. So we'll let you run with a lot of the communications. So we did. I think one of the things we adapted to during this pandemic was just that. We looked around the crisis management team, and we said, well, who's going to take on certain things?
Mhm.
And I think it worked out quite well for innovation.
From your perspective, individuals like myself that are sort of moving through our career and, sort of your next generation leaders, if you were to give advice, what would that be?
Well, I think, and again, I don't want to assume that the things that I did is going to work for everyone.
Mhm.
I think the biggest one is kind of what you're doing is just hard work, that extra work that's required, because it's pretty tough to fast track or go farther in a typical 9 to 5 environment. So it's that extra work. It's developing a network. I think that's important. I think the other one is you need to take risks. So as an example, there's some situations in my career path where I not necessarily even took a lateral position, but I took a lateral but even less pay
Mhm.
in order to achieve what I wanted to in a few years. And that was tough to do. It took courage, and again, I think you talked about earlier about the planning. In order to achieve that plan, it was required.
Mhm.
And so for young leaders, I think hard work is kind of a cliche, but I think it's still important. Trying to find ways to expand your network, but you have to be resilient and agile. But I think the other one is just really courageous in taking those risks to put yourself out there
Mhm.
and make a difference or get noticed.
And if I said, if you sit back and think the one thing that makes you the proudest as a leader, what would that be?
Um, I think that the proudest things I can think of are those point in times where you brought an organization to a better spot.
Mhm.
Not necessarily just your own career or your own personal situation, but if you can look at how you've moved an organization or brought a group or a team or a credit union to a better spot and position that organization for the future. That's really where I can think back of some of those proud moments. And it doesn't have to be the entire organization. It could be even just components. Maybe there was an area that just wasn't doing well, and we found a way to get that area to a better spot or that division.
Mhm.
That's where I think you get most of the energy around success is seeing organizational type change and organizational type success.
Mhm.
And I think the other component is just on a balanced approach, right? I think
Mhm.
it's, I wouldn't say it's easy, but if you just focused in on one thing, like say profits or one component, you could make that work, but at what cost? So if you can bring that forward in a balanced way, I think that's where I find the most energy.
Now, in terms of as a leader, what would be your advice around tackling, diversity and inclusion and corporate social responsibility into sort of the business model of the organization? How should leaders think about this differently?
Well, sometimes I think organizations and leaders look at those opportunities or those initiatives as just that, like an initiative, a framework. But really, I think it's so important that those are inspired by the values, by the core of the organization, right? Because you could have the best diversity framework and the best marketing communication around that. Look at us, but if really not at the core of the organization doing what you're saying, then it really is nothing.
Mhm.
Like I know that there was a lot of examples, when Black Lives Matter came about and people were quickly running to the social media to say, well, look at us, look at my work. But were you doing it before that event? When you're driving home, how do you feel about that with respect to diversity and inclusion? So if you don't have it underpinned by your values of your organization and the values of the individuals, then it doesn't work. So I think that's where you need to start. You need to really look at the basis of the culture, and start from that perspective. And only then will you be able to get where you need to. And that sometimes takes some time and patience.
My next one is around, even pre-COVID, you hear a lot of, we have to digitize everything, and my digital strategy is at the top of everything that I do. And what is sort of your perspective around, from a leadership perspective? Yes, you can digitize, automate everything, but the underlying business models, way of thinking, that is what requires the change. What are your thoughts around that? And what do you think leaders are not understanding or tackling well that you would advise?
Well, and this is an area that I have to get better at, and it really starts with the people, the change.
Mhm.
So, if I were to look at my leadership style, one of the things I need to get better at is, respecting the distance people need to go from that traditional environment to the environment of today of disruption. See, a lot of times people think that, it's leadership that's bringing this to the organization, all of this disruption and change, but it's not. It's just the industry that we're in.
Mhm.
So it's up to leaders to make sure that we provide the environment to be successful in the digital space, because it's not going away. Like, there's a concept out there called gradual then sudden, and for a number of years we've been in that gradual path, and now it's sudden, and things like COVID comes along, and all of a sudden it just totally provides a catalyst and makes that change exponential. So you don't have the opportunity anymore to just change, you have to transform. And so I think one of the opportunities for leadership is to identify and respect the fact that people have different journeys with respect to getting to that digital space. But the other component here is to really attach the concept of digitalization, not just meaning digital. Digitalization can help the entire organization, no matter how you interact with your staff or your membership. For as an example, if we do a really good job at innovation, digitalizing our organization, it will help with things like employee engagement and work-life balance and mental wellness, because it'll provide opportunities for us to do things more efficiently and free up time to do the things that we're not getting to. It'll help us with our satisfaction scores with our members, because I don't care how old you are, you want that amazing experience. It's not just the millennials or other demographics looking for this. They want that amazing experience that they're getting in other industries. So digitalization helps that. It helps reduce friction or move it to the end. And if you do a good job at transforming your organization, it helps with engagement, it helps with net promoter score. It'll help you grow as an organization, because you have to make sure that there is a solid path for growth. And that growth will actually allow you to continue to live up to things like your values and your core strategy. So if you can attach digitalization to more than just digital, I think that's where the success is. And you have to demonstrate that. And I think the other one is back to the people, is you have to provide comfort that we're not working really hard and becoming more digital so that we can reduce or eliminate jobs, as an example. You have to prove out that it's going to help their day to day, and then allow the foundation to grow. Because I think a lot of people get caught up in AI and automation, thinking that that's just going to displace the workforce. I think it actually will enrich the workforce, and you might be doing something different in a few years or more, but it's not like it's here to replace you. And that's where I think you need to provide that safety to the organization.
Now, if I could ask, if you could do two things or two accomplishments as a leader before you retire, those top two things, what would they be?
Well, I think the first one would be to future proof the organization. it's not good enough for leaders to just say, well, let's make the organization a bit better. You have to, and you're obligated to make sure that it's future proofed. Right? So I think that has so many different things, but I think that's the way you have to look at things. And with that becomes, things like resilience and being able to, to really, transform in today's disruptive times. But if I were to retire and I could look back and say, the leadership of this organization did a really good job future proofing the organization for what's coming, because what's coming is a lot different than what we've experienced. I think that would be a really good time, to be able to, to move on to the next phase of your life.
Sounds good. Now, on a personal level, what do you like to do?
Well, on a personal level, I like things things that are just kind of totally different than what I do day to day. So I love things like woodworking and manual labor and mountain biking. So those are some of the things that inspire me. So that's kind of a general thing. We love to do outdoors type of activities. The other thing is I'm pretty focused and curious around digital. So I think if I were to look at things I like to do outdoors, I can list them. But if I'm inside, I'm pretty addicted to this digital space that's impacting just about everything in our lives.
One of my questions, you may not like this, but it's one of my favorite questions. If you see yourself on the Time magazine one day, what would you like it to say?
So is this professional related or just anything?
Anything.
Time magazine. I don't know. I would say Dan Johnson, futurist of the decade.
Mm-hmm. And then my last question is that I'm asking every leader, that if you were to give one quote, that would be the legacy as how you want to be known as a leader. What would that quote be?
I think the quote would be, in today, it's not enough to just change. It's you're required to transform. Mm-hmm. I think the change curve is vertical, mm-hmm. Right? So I think the quote would be, it would be really about that. Is it's not good enough to just change. It's required to transform, mm-hmm. and I think that pushes us a bit beyond just kind of change management into disruptive thinking. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be a component of how I would probably position how I approach a lot of things in a professional life.